Hello and welcome back to the second episode of Staple or Stinker with our good friend, the Cuddly Gas Bear. The premise of this game is we've taken 5 cards, all suggested by you, the community, and Gas Bear has to work out if they're staples, meaning really, really super strong, or stinkers, meaning just terrible cards, never play with them. Without further ado and messing about, let's just get straight into it with the first card, which was suggested by Solar Flare, our good friend Solar, and they have asked for Exploit the Gap. Now, Exploit the Gap is a 6k German order, and it reads, if you control the front line, draw one of 3 top units of your deck, give it Blitz, and set the cost to 0, put the rest to the bottom. Now, it's a little bit confusing with the wording. What it means is look at the top 3 units of your deck, pick one of those, and give that one Blitz, and set its cost to 0, and put the rest away.
Just to confirm, is that when it says set cost to 0, is that in your hand or is operation cost?
That is the deployment cost, so it costs 0 to play. So you can get like a really expensive unit and set its cost to 0 and play it for free.
Yeah, so you could play like a 9 cost unit for 6 essentially, and give it Blitz.
Essentially, yeah, and you also this effect lasts throughout the rest of the game, so you don't have to play it on the turn you draw it. You can wait a couple turns, then play it later.
Yeah. That's good. In general, I think it looks like a good card to me. I'm only thinking that, like, it's when I look at cards and general and stuff, I tend to think of like, how niche is it? Like, if it's only gonna work in like very specific situations, then it's harder to sort of make use of most of the time. My feeling from this is I feel like Germany aggressive was certainly quite a thing when I was playing. So they like to have the front line, and then it's going to give you a choice of 3 guaranteed units. So you're going to pick a unit of some stage, and at 6 cost you're going to have hopefully used a good bunch of cheap ones. And then, yeah, giving it Blitz. And I mean, it's sad if you draw lots of good units, I guess. But I think it's good. I'm looking towards a staple. I'm feeling pretty confident, but the way you do this, the way this game's, I know you play loads of mind games with me, and I'm worried about getting mind gamed. And I feel like my reputation of 100% streaks at stake. But I'm going with my gut. I'm going staple.
So, Exploit the Gap is, in fact, a stinker. Unfortunately, yeah, excellent suggestion by Solar Flare here. So, the issue with this card is the fact that it wants to be hitting these super high-cost units, but you need these low-cost units to take the front line, right? So, like you say, you've used a lot of your low-cost units, but because of how deck building works, you're still going to have a lot more low-cost units in the deck. So it hasn't found that niche where the deck has high-cost units, but also guarantees the front line. And if you don't have the front line, then this is just a dead card. There's nothing you can do with it without having the front line. It's not like you can play it without having the front line, and then it only gets the cost reduction if you have the front line. It's completely dead if you don't have it. So you're not able to hit those super high value units, while also having a deck which can consistently hold the front line, especially since it's a German elite. There are other cards in other decks that might enable it, but you can't really synergize those with this just because of that elite status. It doesn't really work quite so well with it. But we have managed to catch you out with the first one.
Damn it.
We're going to go straight into the second one. This was suggested by Bordigotto, and it is Feigned Retreat. Now, it costs 6 credits, and it reads, discard your entire hand, but whenever you deploy a unit for the rest of this battle, draw a card.
Alright, so I think I just need to confirm something with regards to deck building. Is it in all decks that you're limited on the amount of elites you can take? Or is it just like in certain leagues and stuff?
So in regular decks, you can bring as many elites as you want of the major nation, and then you can't bring any of the ally nation.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, if you add them as allies, then you can't bring the elites. So both this and the previous one is our elites. I'm going to be second guessing myself. I know I've had a good run, but I feel like I've got one wrong, and I'm worried I'm gonna start getting a streak. This card, discard your hand, and when you deploy a unit this battle, draw a card. So you would go into your next turn with 0 cards, and then if you don't draw a unit, you can't do anything except play that.
Exactly.
I presume. But then again, Japan do like to play lots of units, so I'm unsure. I think this is maybe one of the most, because it sounds like it could be really good if you got, but I guess it's sort of hard to use, because if you've got a decent hand, you play it and you're losing everything, and to properly get use of it, you want to play all the good stuff and then get it down. But I think it's got potential, but then it's also late game. I keep going staple stinker. I'm gonna hate myself if I get this wrong, but I'm going staple. It's like the least confident one I've ever been on, but I'm going staple.
Okay, so going staple, Feigned Retreat is an absolute staple. So it is just unbelievably strong in a very specific deck. But that deck has been sort of top 1, top 2 meta deck since its debut a while ago in, I believe it was World at War. It was Theatres of War, sorry. So what Feigned Retreat does is it combos super well with a card called a Rado. A Rado is a German fighter, and it reads, when you deploy this unit, if the enemy have more units than you, draw a random order from your deck. So what you do is you build a Japanese deck with 1 or 2 orders in it. So you put Feigned Retreat and 1 other high value order, and then just a bunch of cheap units with Blitz and sort of units that have deployment effects that sort of mimic orders, so you can still get these effects. So, it might be deployment killer unit, deployment pinner unit, this sort of thing. So you just build your deck with like 1 or 2 orders, and then you play this Arado, you draw a random order from your deck, and you can consistently hit this. And that means that sort of potential flaw of hitting an order off the top of your deck is now like negated, because your deck is essentially 37 units and 2 orders. So you almost never hit the order off the top of your deck. And even if you do, because you're only running 1 super high value order, if you do hit that order off the top of your deck, it's not the end of the world, because it will be something like Desperate Measures, which costs 2 credits and does 2 damage to all enemy units. It's like the most efficient AoE in the game. But when this card was sort of announced and when it was previewed, there was a lot of mixed reactions to it. Some people, like myself, were super eager on this card. I thought it was going to be amazing. The idea that you drop this as soon as possible. You don't care that you've discarded your whole hand, because you essentially have infinite cards for the rest of the game. But then some people looked at it and were just like, this is sort of quite sluggish. It's got the drawback where if you draw orders, you're going to have to build around this. But it turned out it's absolutely insane to build around, because it essentially means you have, as many cards as you need for the rest of the game.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I'd thought about completely building your deck around it. And that deck you described is really smart. Like I can just picture it being super effective and also probably really annoying to play against. But yeah, I'm chuffed. I was worried, but yeah, I can see definitely if you build around it, it sounds very effective.
No, yeah, it's super strong to build around, and there's even some decks which have like synergies with when you discard your hand. So you'll have cards like when you discard it, get this bonus. So they try and build up their hand with a bunch of cards, and then they discard their whole hand, and they get a bunch of synergy when they discard. But the next card, once again suggested by Bordigotto, it is the 32nd Infantry Regiment. It's a 2-1 for 1. with 1 operation cost, and its deployment, draw another 32nd Infantry Regiment from your deck. And it is a standard, so you can have up to 4 of them in your deck, and yeah, you play 1 and it draws another copy of itself from your deck, and then you can just sort of play them all out.
So, just confirm, if you don't have any left in your deck, the deployment does not proc.
It does absolutely nothing, and it's just a 2-1 for 1.
Yeah, it's not like the light infantry one where it dies and like creates another card.
No, it's not like that one.
Yeah, cool. As far as 1-drops go, it doesn't strike me as particularly bad. I mean, it doesn't have anything else going for it in terms of, like, it is super susceptible to a bunch of orders or deployment things that do like 1 damage to things. But again, it is a 1-drop. And I feel like 1-drop's giving you more options. Like, you play it and on your second turn you can play another one and an order or a move. Like, you're gonna be able to guarantee doing something, whereas it's nothing worse than like getting to your second turn and having practically nothing you can do. So it seems reliable in that aspect, but it's not like the most terrifying card. So I could see it possibly not being super effective at the top tier, but I'm gonna say I feel like it's somewhat reliable, and so I'm gonna go with staple.
Yeah, going with staple. Well, 32nd Infantry Regiment is in fact a staple. So yeah, it just complements this USA frontline deck really, really nicely. It is this super reliable 1-drop, and you can mulligan around it really, really well. And it just gives you this cannon fodder where you can just spit a bunch of these out, and you can trade into aggro decks 1 for 1, and you really don't lose anything for doing so. You tend not to be too aggressive with these, because they're quite slow of that 1-op cost. So, getting a whole bunch of them to the front line and hitting face, it's really quite slow. So they tend to be more sort of cannon fodder. Like you say, they're weak to AoE, but if they all die to AoE, that doesn't matter too much. Generally, one of the big issues, if 2 or 3 units die to AoE, is you've gone down on card advantage. Your opponent has used 1 card to clear a lot of yours. But with these, you're not losing card advantage if they all die to AoE. So they're like the definition of cannon fodder in cards. They can all die to a big AoE, and you really don't mind that much. And they also enable cards like the Sherman a lot, because you can sort of spam the board with these, just have a whole bunch of them down. You might better buff them with a card like We Can Do It, and then you just spam the front line with them, and you can just consistently play cards like M4 Sherman. And then in some decks as well, they play this card called Unity of Strength, and it's a 2k order that gives something +X, where X is the number of infantry you control. So obviously if you have loads of these, then they become really quite scary, because they offer this potential for a huge buff. So they're really consistent, they're really reliable, they're quite versatile in the roles they can fill, and even in the scenarios where they're pretty bad against some decks, like maybe Resistance or something, at worst, they're just going to thin in your deck and mean you're going to draw things which aren't 1-drops, because, they're no longer in your deck. You've got a better chance of drawing the stuff you need. So yeah, they're a staple, and I can't see them going away anytime soon just because of how reliable they are. They sort of have this ability where you can really rely on them. The next card we've got was suggested by Cass Westin, and this is Snipe. And it's a countermeasure, so you activate it during your turn, and then it activates when your opponent does a certain thing during their turn. And Snipe costs 2 credits to activate, and it reads, when an enemy unit attacks, it becomes a 2-2. Now that effect is forever. It doesn't become a 2-2 to end of turn, it becomes a 2-2 for the rest of the battle.
Okay, so just a clarification on exactly how this works. So you activate it, I've not used it crap ton of countermeasures in my time, but you activate it, and then essentially the first, or is it any unit for the next turn, or is it the first unit?
Just the
attacks?
first unit. So the first time the trigger happens, this activates, and then the effect happens, and then the card is discarded.
Yeah, so say they had like some beefy 9-4 thing, and they attacked like anything, even your HQ or whatnot, it would go from 9-4 to 2-2 for the rest of the game.
That is correct.
Okay. This is a tough one. It's countermeasures are interesting, like just from a just a whole sort of psychological standpoint, and I also feel like I've had 2 staples in a row. First one was a stinker. I wonder if I'm due a stinker, but this is the sort of thing that I think is when people are aware of its existence, then I would imagine it's suddenly less. Like, if this is known as a really meta card, then people would play around it if you could, because you would always, because I'm pretty sure if you deploy countermeasure, you look as if you just ended your turn with 2 credits, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So if you're playing against anyone that's running America or has America ally, and you see them have 2 credits left, so I know there's a bunch of counter measures, you would presumably, at that sort of like really good level, try and play around the fact that, well, just in case, I may attack with one of my not so good units first. If possible, I appreciate it then limits their options. I mean, there is the potential that you could actually buff something on this, which I think is inherently very funny. But I think it can be. It sounds like it could be really good if used right. But I think it's the sort of thing people would play around, and people would try be good enough, and I think people are smart enough at that level that they'll be aware of it and keep those sort of things in mind. Like, if they're playing America, they get America ally, these are the possible things they've got in their deck. Oh, it's 2 credits, I'm aware that they've got this sniped that could be hitting me. So I'm gonna go stinker. That's what I'm feeling.
Okay, so Sniped is in fact a stinker. Not quite for all the reasons you went through, but some of them certainly match. Being able to buff the enemy's card on accident is a big component of it. They hit with like a 1-1 or something, and then it becomes a 2-2, and you've just buffed their unit. But one of the big draw sides is it's also just not efficient enough. Really, for a countermeasure to be played, it has to be super, super efficient, because you have this inherent drawback that you're spending credits for A, you don't know what it's going to hit, and B, you don't know if it's going to hit at all, so you might be spending credits for no return on investment, which is just an inherent flaw in how countermeasures operate. So to make up for this flaw, a lot of countermeasures are really efficient. From the Deep costs 2 credits, and it reads, when an enemy deploys a unit, destroy it. Just remove it from existence. And you can hit really high value units with that, and you're super happy, or you can hit a medium to low value unit and you're still pretty happy. But Sniped, on the other hand, it just reduces its stats to 2-2. If it's got a problem ability, the ability still continues while the unit's on the board. Something like a KV, which does 2 damage whenever you draw a unit. The KV will still exist on the board. It's still going to be doing its problem. And while you do have the potential to hit these high-value big units and make them 2-2s, the payoff just isn't worth the investment. It asks too much from you, especially putting 2 credits up every single turn to try and hit these high-value units. It doesn't offer enough for what it asks for it to become worth it, and it has too much potential to hit something, A, you can buff the enemy unit, but also if the enemy hits with a 2-2 or a 3-3, you're barely affecting the unit. There's a lot of units where this is going to reduce 1 or 2 stats from the unit, at which point you spent 2 credits to remove 1 or 2 defense or 1 or 2 attack, and that's just really not high value. It is worth noting in the draft game mode, this is actually not a bad card, because that game mode is a lot slower and you can sort of play around it a lot more. You can wait until there's 1 or 2 units on the enemy board and it's going to be more reliable and consistent just because of how that game mode operates differently to regular sort of constructed. But we're just talking constructed here, and it is absolutely a stinker. There's also a couple other US countermeasures. There's one which costs 2 credits and is called Air Defense, and that does 3 damage to a unit when attacks. If it's an air unit, just destroy it. And people will play around that. People will, be careful to not always hit with the high value units first because of that. So it gets overshadowed by its sort of big sister in air defense. But yeah, it's a stinker, and it asks too much for what it gives. The next one, and this is our final one, so you've gotten 3 right and 1 wrong, so you're close to a 4-1, but if we can get you a 3-2, I'll be perfectly happy with that. It's suggested by Hugo Delphin. This is Partisans. It's a 6k Soviet order, and it says take control of an enemy unit, and at the end of your turn, send it back to the enemy's hand.
I just want to start off by saying getting the answer right for all the wrong reasons is kind of my speciality. I'm chuffed about that. This card looks like a hell of a lot of fun, and cards that look a hell of a lot of fun for their potential to do great fun things are usually more fun and less reliable. But this, again, sorry, I feel like I'm asking lots of questions this time. What happens if you take control of a unit that, say they've got like 3 units in the front line and you take control of one of them, or one of the ones in the back line, or can you not affect the back line if they have the front line?
So it's actually quite interesting because there's a few different sets of rules on how it works. So when you take control of an enemy unit, if the enemy hold the front line, the unit goes to your support line unless it's the only enemy in the front line, at which point it stays in the front line. If you control the front line and you take something from their back line, it goes all the way to your support line. So units will go to your support line unless it's the only unit in the front line, at which point it will stay there.
Okay, I mean, that clarification makes me think bad. But yeah, I feel like you could maybe take over some huge tank or but can you if they have like big planes in their backline, can you say like a bomber, can you take that, it comes to your backline and then you can bomb with it? Or if they have the front line, that is, can you target their backline while they control
you can
it?
still target their support line with it. So they could have a whole bunch of units in the front line. You could take a bomber or artillery from their backline and hit with it. You could take an infantry or tank from their backline and then instantly attack with that. You can take the unit from their backline, it will just go to your support line.
Card sounds hilarious, sounds a lot of fun, quite expensive, and I presume you still have to pay the operating costs of the card that you're taking?
Yeah, you still have to pay the operation cost.
Yeah, it's all sounding very expensive and very... Sometimes it's going to be like completely game changing. I'm going stinker, but it does sound like the sort of card that I'd have a lot of fun using and get exceptionally angry when people use it against me.
So going stinker?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm sorry to say it's a staple. Partisans, and we've managed to get you 3 for 2, which is a huge improvement on last time. But yeah, Partisans is a staple. The deck it's played in is generally Soviet control, which is quite a slow-paced deck. So you're going to use it when that operation cost isn't too bad. It's going to cost you 8 or 9 credits to use, 6 credits to play it, and then to operate it. So you can sort of afford that because you're quite a slow-paced deck that's trying to slow the game down a lot. At which point you can hit the high-value units. And it's a very versatile card. So let's say your enemy has a huge buffed-up unit in the front line and it's a real problem. Well, you can take control of it on turn 6 and not necessarily operate with it, and just use this as a way of bouncing it to your enemy's hand. So because it returns it to the enemy's hand at end of turn, you can take a unit without any intent on using it and just bounce it to the enemy hand. You can also take high-value units and trade them into any high-value unit. So let's say you've got 2 super high-value tanks. I can take one of them, hit the other tank with it, and have them both die. So you can get an insane amount of value there. And then the third and final combo with this is cards like Ural Factories and Red Banner. which destroy a friendly unit and add one of like a cost 1 higher or 2 higher. So what you can do is I can take control of your enemy unit, operate with it, and then play Euro, which destroys the unit I've stolen, places one of 1 higher cost on my side of the board, and I get to keep that at the end of the turn. So I take your unit, I operate with your unit, and I replace your unit with a slightly better unit, and I keep the slightly better unit. So you can just get like an insane amount of value. You know, you can get cards which you cannot get otherwise. If you play Leopold, which is one of the best units in the game, it costs 10 credits. Or I can play Partisans on your Leopold, I can hit your stuff with your Leopold, and then I can play Red Banner on your Leopold, and I get a King Tiger, which is like a 10-10 tank. That means my entire support line and the tank itself cannot be targeted by orders or abilities. So you can sort of just change the course of the whole match just with like a Partisans Red Banner combo. So like you say, it's super slow, so you wouldn't ever play this in a tempo or aggressive deck. But Soviets are really good at playing slow. They have some really good sort of stallers and ways of slowing out the game. And this just offers you a tool which is versatile, it's consistent, and it's just super powerful. But you've still done pretty darn well today. You've gotten 3 right, and we've managed to get you on 2 of them, which is pretty impressive considering almost all of these were picked by people who had seen the video and had, you know, spent 5 or 10 minutes going through the cards and thinking to themselves, what would mess Gasper up? What can we get to get Gasper out? So I'm still pretty impressed. The first one was all my choices, and obviously, you know, that just gives me my perspective on the game only. But when we have the whole community coming together to try and screw you over, it certainly ramps up the difficulty a lot. And yeah, I'm super impressed still on going 3 for 2. And thank you to everyone who has suggested them. And I hope we can have you back in the future, Gasper.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. I'm gutted. I'm gutted and disappointed by myself. And just listening to you describe Partisans, I could just feel my blood boiling. Like I'm angry. I don't even have the game up. I want to quit the game, and I'm not even playing. And I really liked the point you said about that. Even like if they're buffed up and they've added all these buffs, when you send it back to their hand and they put it down again, that it's not going to have those buffs, and they've got to re-put it down and stuff again. Yeah, it's great hearing you explain it, because in context that I don't have it, everything makes a lot more sense.
No, yeah, I imagine the when I'm like, well, you thought this card was bad, but let me tell you about this other card which is in the game which I've not told you about. You got to feel a little bit scammed where you're like, well, I didn't know that card existed.
In fairness, that sounds like my whole experience of playing cards. Like I'm doing something like, right, I'm in a good spot here, and someone just does that. It's like I didn't know they could do that. I'm screwed now.
It's the new player experience, sort of hovering over cards in their history and going, it does what now?
Yeah, pretty much.
Especially when you see an elite for the first time.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of elites where they have super crazy abilities, and you're like, I'm just winning this game. And I remember seeing certain elites for the first time and just being like, I'm sorry, what does that do? Is that fair?
I think, is it carpet bombing, the one that does like something damage to like every single unit on the
it does 3 damage to all enemy units.
I think I had absolutely complete control of the board with like low cost units, and was just about to win the game, and someone carpet bombed me, and I was speechless.
Carpet bombed for the first time. I mean, have you played up against Monty yet? Monty is a sort of classic sort of bullshit card, because it costs 1 credit and it pins all the enemy units, and if it pins 3 or more, it draws you an extra card, so you'll be like in a total winning position, and then your opponent's like, Monty, pin all your units, and then they'll play Shalling, which pins all your units, and then they'll like kill you on the spot, and you'll be like, oh, for God's sake.
I feel like you're just trying to piss me off here. Just making me I can just envision it. It's just
So just for some context, in the official Cards Discord, there is like a suggestions and feedback chat room, right? where you can make threads suggesting things for them to change about the game. Most of them get about 4 or 5 comments. So you make a thread, you'll get 4 or 5 comments, maybe 10 if it's quite a few. I see some which get like 50, which is a lot. Someone made a suggestion on the 11th of January 2023. So this was a few months ago now. It is still active, and it has 1,112 comments. And it is still active to this day. So at the time of recording, it has over 1,000 comments. Come back for next episode. It'll probably have a couple thousand comments on there. I feel sorry for the poor developer who has to check this chat room to see what people are trying to feedback, and they have to go through 1,000 comments to see what people are saying.
Man, yeah, I do feel for them. That sounds, unpleasant to say the least.
But anyway, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to subscribe and like. Go to the comments and suggest your cards for us to get Gaspar in the future. Like I said, we've already got him 3 for 2 this time. I think next time we can probably get you negative. We can get 3 wrong and 2 right, and then one day we're going to get you to go 0 and 5, and we'll replace you. We'll get rid of you. We'll get someone else in here.
Yeah, bring it on. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'll hold my confidence high until it goes, and then I'll walk out with my tail between my legs.